Hey everyone, welcome to another podcast. Today we're going to be talking about biohacking. Biohacking sounds really different, sounds dangerous, and it is all of those things, so stay tuned.
This is the Darshan Talks podcast, regulatory guy, irregular podcast with host Darshan Kulkarni. You can find the show on Twitter at Darshan Talks or the show's website at darshantalks.com.
So welcome to another conversation about biohacking. Again, all the standard disclaimers apply. Obviously, I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm just trying to bring some education, if you will. Doesn't establish an attorney-client relationship. But let's start talking a little bit about what is biohacking. So it's essentially a type of do-it-yourself citizen science. So you talk about body modification with technology. And people use that term generally. Some people use that as taking extra capsules. Some people use that as exercising more. I'm not sure that necessarily qualifies as body hacking. Usually that there has to be, that typically is understood to be more of a technological angle to it. So if you were modifying cells, if you were injecting yourself with certain products, that would typically be considered to be biohacking. Now, again, I'm not trying to poo-poo on someone else's parade. If you're going to exercise, go ahead and exercise. That's a good thing, assuming your doctor's okay with it. But here's the real question. Why would anyone biohack? Why would anyone put probes into themselves? Why would anyone inject themselves with unproven drugs? Couple of different reasons. So the one reason is cybernetic exploration. Like, we've all sort of thought about, if you belong to the world where, you had Data and you had Star Trek, biohacking sort of in that genre. It's kind of cool. So people try to do that. Now, just because it's cool doesn't mean you should do it. And please recognize that part of it. Safety obviously comes first. There's another question about whether you could use that as part of getting personal data about yourself. If you can use this opportunity to say, you know what, let me know more about myself, and biohacking gives you that opportunity. Then there's this public health angle to it, where you're advocating for privacy rights, advocating for your own rights, and you're saying, I want to control my own data. And biohacking gives you that opportunity. And then there's this question of open source medicine. Some people might say that, why should I depend on big pharma for medicines? Let me try to figure out the solution to my own problems. And an interesting example of that might be the movie, I'm forgetting, I'm blanking on the name. There was this movie where this child, I'm blanking on the name. I'm sure I'll put it into the show notes. But essentially it came down to him taking, I think it was grapeseed oil, and the disease didn't spread. Lorenzo's Gold, I believe that's what it's called. So take a look at that. And some might say that's not biohacking because there's no technology, and that's a fair argument. But it's some kind of citizen-based medicine, if you will. So what are some examples of biohacking? There have been organizations that will hack insulin pumps so that there's a certain level of insulin that goes through the body. That would be an example of biohacking. There's another project, barcoding, to identify pet owners by the feces that their animals leave behind. That's an interesting version of biohacking. Bioartists using living organisms in aesthetic creations to question the relationship between science, culture, and life. It's a type of biohacking. There are others where you will modify and inject yourself with microbes that are attenuated cells. That's an example of biohacking. So is this like a crazy scientist thing? Are these just random people doing it to themselves? Turns out mostly these individuals have bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degrees. Only 8% exclusively work in home labs doing garage or kitchen biosciences. Most work in community spaces. Interestingly enough, they're mostly male and they're professional scientists. So it sounds like a lot of these people who are doing this know what they're doing to themselves, or at least have a chance to know what they're doing to themselves. So again, this is a sign of don't do it to yourself if you have no idea what you're doing. Don't do it to yourself if your safety is at risk. What are some initial considerations? So the first question is, if you're biohacking, what is the impact if you actually discover something? if you have an employment agreement, your employment agreement may allow your employer to own your inventions. If that's true, you need to look at that and what is the impact of what you're doing. The Bayh-Dole Act, if you are paid in whole or in part by government funds, so if you're a professor, if you will, because a lot of these people probably are, something like the Bayh-Dole Act can come into play. The Bayh-Dole Act basically says that if the government pays in any way for your research, they have the right to come in with what are called march-in rights and to essentially use your patented product in a way that they deem appropriate. And interestingly enough, it's the FBI that's looking over your shoulder, because if you're injecting yourself with cells, you might land up becoming contagious, and the government, like the FBI, might be looking over your shoulder because of it. So why would pharma actually be interested in biohackers? Number one, because they might actually land up with new interesting companies. Number two, because these are incredibly smart scientists who probably truly believe in their research, and that's a really good place to be. They're driven by the need to survive, to the need to be better. That's a really good driving force. Now that you're converting and moving towards a patient-centric environment, to have the patient and the scientist be the same, again, that's part of the culture of biohacking. And it's translating into increased data transparency, because these biohackers are saying, if I discover something, I want my people to have access to it. One of the original biohackers, for lack of a better term, might be Louis Pasteur, who came up with his own version to treat some of these, to come up with antibiotics, if you will. Those would be an example. I don't know if he tested it on himself, is the only question I was trying to figure out. And then there's the question of actually owning your own data and getting paid for it. So pharma might be interested, if you actually find something, to be able to use your data. If you have any questions about what biohacking is, how it applies to you, if you're thinking about something, feel free to reach out, leave a comment. I'd be happy to respond. If you have any questions, please subscribe. Ring the bell. Talk to you guys soon. Take care.
This is the Darshan Talks podcast. Regulatory Guy, Irregular Podcast with host Darshan Kulkarni. You can find the show on Twitter at Darshan Talks or the show's website at darshantalks.com.